What's going on, Meat Mafia? Welcome back to another episode of the Meat Mafia podcast. Before we get rolling here today, we want to give a quick shout out to you, the listener. We are so thankful to have you on board with the Meat Mafia, and we cannot thank you enough for your endless support. Without you guys, we are nothing. So thank you so much for your comments, feedback, likes, subscribes, listens, everything. It means the world to us. With that being said, please go to your podcast medium's platform, give us a 5-star review. If it's not 5 stars, maybe don't give us a review. Subscribe, do the whole thing. We really appreciate that. And also, please go check out some of the links below. We have some great sponsors, and they are killing it in the world of food and providing great high-quality food for people just like yourself. Quickly outlining our sponsors, we have Holy Cow Beef, Rick Ranches, Equip Foods, and the Carnivore Bar. These are all great products. If you want to learn more, go check out the links below. Without further ado, here's a word from our sponsors. Holy Cow Beef is a regenerative farm based out of Lubbock, Texas, with humanely raised grass-fed, grass-finished beef available for sale and shipment. Companies like ButcherBox source from outside of the US and Australia and don't specifically have the American Grass-Fed Association, or AGA, label, but Holy Cow does. They also sell chicken and pork in addition to their amazingly high-quality beef raised right here in Texas. Alden and Ann Warren have overcome their own health struggles, and they have inspired us by the way they live their lives and by the way they raise their animals. So go check them out in the link below, and they also accept Bitcoin, so all you Bitcoiners out there, go check out Holy Cow Beef. Also, if you're in Colorado, go check out Rick Ranches, a grass-fed, grass-finished regenerative farm servicing all over Colorado. He also accepts Bitcoin, so all you Bitcoiners out there, go hit up Rick Ranches and get your beef today. This episode of the podcast is brought to you by the Carnivore Bar. The Carnivore Bar is an animal-based, shelf-stable product with only 3 simple ingredients: beef, tallow, and salt. The bar is inspired by the ancient traditions of Native Americans who needed to create pemmican bars to preserve meat for long-distance travel. The Carnivore Bar is perfect for animal-based athletes or busy people looking to follow a low-carb diet. It's easy to throw in a bag and take with you anywhere you're going, whether it's a workout, hike, or even packing it for a snack at work. I throw them in my triathlon bag and take down a bar immediately after working out. They're a fantastic product, so go check them out and use our discount code in the link below. Ben Azadi, welcome to the Meat Mafia podcast. This is great. We're doing a little swap of podcasts here. We were on yours last week, so now we have you on the Meat Mafia podcast. This is gonna be a good one, so we're excited for this.
Harry and Brett, I'm excited to be back with you. We had an awesome time on my Keto Kamp Podcast, and now we're going to dive deep into another great conversation. So thanks for having me on your show.
Yeah, and the cool part about this too, Ben, is that we got to initially meet at KetoCon. We were both walking around, and we had exchanged some messages on Twitter, but we were actually able to shake each other's hands, give each other a hug, and it's good to see that you can still build relationships in person and then carry that out to the podcast and the social media space. So it was pretty cool.
It was cool. And I didn't know what you looked like because your Twitter photo is not you, right? So I'm glad you came up to me and said, hey, this is Brett. And I actually have video content of us meeting, and we were talking about exogenous ketones. I remember the conversation.
Yeah. Well, exogenous ketones is actually something we have bulleted down for today's conversation. But to kick it off, I mean, you're incredibly well respected in the ketogenic low carb space. You've written multiple best-selling books. You're the owner of the Keto Kamp Podcast. And I think you have a goal of making 1 billion people. Is it making 1 billion people metabolically healthy? Is that correct?
Yeah, educating 1 billion people, making them metabolically healthy. Yep, that's right.
Awesome. And in doing some prep work for this podcast, I mean, you have a pretty unbelievable story around weight loss and overcoming depression to get to the point where you're at now. So I think we'd love to start it off just learning a little bit more about your story, Ben. And I think we can naturally spiral out from there.
Absolutely. And, all 3 of us have very similar stories, and pain to purpose. A lot of us in this space that have podcasts and are doing cool things went through really challenging times. And when you're going through the challenges, it's hard to kind of see this is going to be something great for the future and I could serve people and get out of this. But when you go through it, it's very difficult, right? So I was victim of poor mindset and poor eating, standard American diet, AKA stupid American diet. Growing up here in Miami Beach, Florida, I was pretty much left to my own devices, meaning my parents were divorced and my mom worked 3 jobs, 2 Kentucky Fried Chickens and a Walgreens. So she was never home. And I was spending time with people who were gang members, people who were selling drugs, just a bad crowd that I hung out with. And I developed bad habits, eating sugar, processed foods, addictions to video games and drugs. And I was a really bad kid growing up. I developed gained a lot of weight, became physically obese, and then eventually mentally obese, which kind of goes hand in hand. And I had suicidal thoughts. I was really depressed growing up, low self-esteem, low confidence. And then I became an adult. And I remember 24 years old, actually 23, turning 24, going through a really bad breakup with my ex-girlfriend. She left the relationship because all I wanted to do was play Call of Duty and Madden, and I didn't want to focus on the relationship. So rightfully so. And I was devastated. I never did any kind of self-development, never exercised, didn't have anything going on with my health. And I was 23, turning 24, and I was broken. I was 250 pounds, 34% body fat. And I was going through a really difficult time in my life, to the point where I remember waking up and wanting to go back to bed, because every time I would wake up, I would think about all of my challenges. I would play the victim card and I would cry. And all I would want was for my pain to end. And I would explore ways to end my pain, meaning I would go on the internet looking for ways to commit suicide multiple times. But every time I did that, my mom kept flashing in my mind. I kept thinking about my mother. And if I took my life, like, oh my gosh, my mom would have to deal with that devastation. I never wanted to do that to my mom. So it stopped me. But this went on for months, where I would explore suicide and stop myself. And something happened where a friend of mine handed me a book and said, hey, I know you're going through some challenging times right now. I think this book will really help you out. And for some reason, I read the book, first book that I ever read in my life. And that one book led to 5 books. 5 books led to 20, and so on and so on. And these books opened up a whole new world to me. They did a lot of things for me, but the most important thing the books did for me, and I really believe this is important for any change in life, is the books helped me take ownership and responsibility for the first time in my life. And really understanding that word responsibility is important. That is our ability to respond to life. For me, my ability to respond to life was poor. I was the victim. Of course, I'm overweight and obese. It's my mom bringing me home Kentucky Fried Chicken. It's my bad genetics. My dad's diabetic. It's my enabling family members. And I was just playing the victim card, right? But when you take ownership, that goes out the window. When you take ownership and responsibility, you stop being the victim of your history and you immediately become the victor of your destiny. And that's exactly what happened to me. I started to move my body, started to change my food, eat more whole food. And I went through this incredible transformation. 9 months, I lost about 80 pounds. I went from 250 pounds down to 170. I went from 34% body fat at that time down to 6% body fat. So finally carved out a physical 6-pack. And as a fat kid growing up, that was a dream of mine. But the most important thing that I achieved was a mental 6-pack, and what that did for my mental health, and how I really started to understand how important your thoughts are towards healing your body. And that was 2008, about 14 years ago. I've been a student ever since. I was a personal trainer. I opened up a CrossFit gym, sold a CrossFit gym, became certified as a health coach, and kind of went along the way to create Keto Kamp. But that's where it all started for me. Pain to purpose was exactly my story, and very similar to both of your stories.
Well, your story speaks to a lot of people, and it really is that transformation of going from a victim to a victor, which I think you perfectly outlined and explained. But that taking ownership process, you talked about moving your body, eating real foods. What does that look like on a day-to-day basis when you're sitting in bed, opening your eyes and going, man, I just want to go back to bed? Like, how do you really put that into action so you start to take ownership?
Yeah, I would say it starts with a tweak, right? What's one tweak I could make today that I could continue making for the rest of the week, and then add to that, right? So for example, maybe it's getting up in the morning and you're like, oh, I don't want to deal with this day. I'm depressed. You're thinking about all your problems. Maybe that one tweak is, okay, but I'm just going to go for a 30-minute walk in the morning with the sun rising. I'm going to, sync my hormones, my circadian rhythm with the sun. And I'm going to add a 30-minute walk starting today. And you do that for 7 days, right? And then next week, it's okay. Now that I've done that, the next tweak I'm going to add is, instead of eating breakfast, lunch, breakfast, lunch, dinner, excuse me, breakfast, snack, lunch, snack, dinner, lunch, and all these meals throughout the day. I'm just going to have my 3 meals a day, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I'm going to eliminate the snacking, right? That could be the next tweak. So the answer would be find out what that tweak is for you, master it, and then next week, add a new tweak, master that habit and add that. I really believe small tweaks lead to giant peaks. So find out what that one thing is you can add, and then add to that once you gain momentum.
And Ben, what were the series of tweaks for you that really got you from 250 to 170, from 34% body fat to 6% body fat?
For me, it was moving my body. At that time, I was living a sedentary lifestyle. I remember pulling out my back several times when I was 22 years old, 23 years old. I was working at a packing and shipping store as a manager at that time. Actually, it's funny, in the same city that I live in right now called Bay Harbor Islands, right down the street. It's not there anymore, but it's funny how things come full circle. And I remember a customer walking in, an old lady. She was like 70, 80 years old. And she asked me to get something for her in the back, and I dropped it. So I went to go, I was 22 years old, I believe at this time. I went to go pick it up. And as I'm standing up, I pull out my back and I couldn't even move. She actually had to help me like sit on a chair. And these were things that were happening to me all the time as a 22-year-old. I was wearing knee braces to walk around the mall. I couldn't do things that I wanted to do. So for me, it was all right, moving my body, but I couldn't run. I couldn't really work out hard. I didn't even know how to train. So I actually ended up doing P90X. I'm sure you two have heard of P90X because I was too afraid to go to the gym and I didn't know what I was doing. So I just started doing some workout videos at home. Then I started doing some cycling because it was low impact. And for me, it was just moving my body as the first tweak. And then after that, I started to change my nutrition and do different things. But the first step was moving my body for me.
Yeah, the moving your body is a really important one. And I think when people hear that, they think, oh, I need to go do something super intense. But you even mentioned just walking as a way to get some exercise and get moving, which I think is an amazing tool. It's one that I've used in the past, just like simplifying it down to the most basic things that you can be doing and just really work on those. Is that something that you've used in your movement philosophies, but also like your dietary philosophies as well?
Yeah. I mean, it's walking in the morning on an empty stomach is a great way to lose some weight, right? And especially if you do it when the sun comes out, because the benefits of that are tremendous. So first of all, take off your sunglasses, expose your skin, like get some sunlight on your skin through your retina, take off the sunglasses. And what that's going to do for you, it's going to signal to your body to start producing melatonin, to store, right? So it'll actually tell the pineal gland to start storing melatonin for the night coming up ahead. And then as the sun goes down, you start releasing that melatonin. And melatonin not only is important for sleep, it's also an antioxidant. Every cell makes it. It's actually, melatonin is the #1 antioxidant for the mitochondria. Okay. Wow. It's very, very important and very, very powerful. So that's a benefit, one right there. But also you're walking on an empty stomach. So you wake up in the morning fasted. Now you're burning more of your body fat. You might be producing ketones. But it doesn't have to be P90X. It doesn't have to be CrossFit. It doesn't have to be a marathon in the beginning. It can be eventually. But one thing you can do is go out there and walk. And if you don't have the ability to walk around your neighborhood, you could walk around your house. You could walk around your backyard. You could walk around the hallways in your building. There's always a way to do it. But that's the difference, right? Finding a way to do it versus making an excuse is the difference between somebody who's interested in getting healthy versus somebody who's committed. The committed person says, okay, my neighborhood, I can't really walk through. There's a lot going on, but I have hallways in my building. I'm going to just walk back and forth in my hallway. That person is committed. The person who's interested will just say, I'll wait until this happens before I go for that walk, right? So there's a big difference between being interested and being committed.
So you said that, so some of the levers you initially pulled were the movement and the walking, getting out of that sedentary lifestyle. And then when and how did nutrition start to come into the equation for you?
It probably came in within the first couple of weeks for me. And it was very easy for me to get results with nutrition because my diet was so poor. Because I was eating those microwave pizzas and bagel bites and Pop-Tarts, the old standard American diet. So for me, it was a matter of, all right, I'm just going to eat real food. I'm just going to focus on like real food. I didn't call it it wasn't keto because I didn't do keto back then. It wasn't vegan. It was just eating as much real food as possible. And what I found was that as I started to eat more real food, I was less hungry. meaning I wasn't snacking as much. I wasn't overeating. It really just helped me feel full, and also fueled my workouts. And so that was the next thing. It was a couple weeks later where I started to just eat more whole food. And then as I started to lose weight, and it was happening pretty fast because I was 24 years old. I'm a guy, which will happen pretty fast when you make all these changes. Then I could be more aggressive with my exercise because I was getting weight off. My knees were feeling better. My back was feeling better. So I started to play basketball. I started to progress with P90X, but it was that one tweak that I gained momentum on, which led to the second, the third, and so on.
If there's one thing, so through this whole journey of transforming, if there's one thing you could tell your 24-year-old self now that you learned through the process, what would that be? Just a simple message for young Ben Azadi.
Good question. I would tell young Ben Azadi that you don't get what you want in life. You get what you are. And what you are the 60,000 thoughts that you have every single day. Right. So you are the most, I would tell Ben, and I would tell the world, you are the most influential person you'll speak to today. So how are those conversations going? Are you telling yourself you're ugly, you're fat, you can't do this, and all those self-limiting beliefs? Or are you using empowering language to speak to yourself? Because you become what you think about most of the time. So I would educate myself on becoming aware of those thoughts and choosing uplifting, powerful thoughts. And it's not woo-woo. There's science to back that up. There's actually research to show what you say to yourself manifest as your habits and reality.
Are you a big meditator?
I'm not. The form of meditation that I do is walking my dog in the morning without, listening to music or anything, but doing like a walking meditation with affirmations. But I don't have like a set meditation schedule yet. What about you guys? Do any of you meditate?
Yeah, just the reason I asked is because I think meditation is a great way to kind of like drain the pool and kind of clear things out. You sit there for 5 minutes in the morning, close your eyes, let yourself like go outside, get some sunlight and do it. And I think you kind of you realize like what's on your subconscious, and you can kind of just take a quick audit of the 5 to 10 things that seem to be resting on your mind. And then I think it allows you to kind of organize those 60,000 thoughts and start to put some energy behind how you want to move those thoughts throughout the day. For me, I think it's the most powerful tool. It at the beginning is very uncomfortable. I think the first few times you do it, you sit there and you're like, what am I doing here? Like, is this just like some woo-woo crazy thing? But I truly believe in it. So
do you do guided meditation, or do you just sit there and kind of in stillness?
So I started out using the Headspace app, and then I've now just gone by, complete silence, doing it myself, because I've figured out kind of a method that works for me. But Brett, I know you're, partially the same with the guided meditations and things.
Yeah, the last month, I would say, I know you've mentioned Bob Proctor being influential to you. He has a really good it's a 20-minute abundance meditation on YouTube that gets you into that headspace. A lot of the positive visualizations and imagery and verbiage that you talk about. So I'll send you that link, but I think it's something that you would definitely like. But Ben, you're perfectly speaking our language too, because we're huge mindset guys. It was actually a shift that we both had mentally that I think got us to the point where we're at right now in a fairly short period of time. So I'm just curious, are clients that you work with often confused when they're coming to you for nutritional advice and you're talking to them about mindset maybe first before anything related to nutrition and diet?
Yeah, they are. I mean, I don't know if I would use the word confused, but maybe surprised. Maybe surprised because they don't see the link between how does like my mindset help me lose weight, right? How does my mindset increase inflammation or lower it, right? So I always explain to them, hey, if you want to build a beautiful house, a beautiful mansion, you have to have a solid foundation, right? The house is just going to be as good as the foundation, right? So what are the foundations of your beautiful house, your beautiful body, your health? Of course, sleep is one of them. Like quality sleep, finding your unique threshold for sleep is a foundation that builds a strong foundation. Number 2 would be movement. We already spoke about that. That could be, going to the gym, or that could be just walking. I mean, whatever you're doing, but movement. Number 3 is mindset. It's I call the mental 6-pack. It's what you're saying to yourself all day long, because that is foundational. I've seen time after time after time me coaching people, giving them exactly what to do, for their unique needs and their unique history in regards to keto, intermittent fasting, carnivore, keto flexing, all the things I teach. But they sometimes fail to do the inner work, the inner sizing, and they get frustrated because they don't get the results that they want to get. It's the missing piece there. And I always tell people, you're only going to get so far if you don't do the inner work. Yeah, you might get some results doing the right macros and carnivore, eating the right foods. That's important. But you're only going to go so far until you get capped out. But when you work on yourself and you practice gratitude and you practice mindset and you read books like Bob Proctor and Dr. Wayne Dyer, when you do the inner work, everything upgrades by default.
Yes.
Carnivore is much better. Keto is much better. Your sleep is much better. Your nervous system is much better. So I always educate them on that. And it's surprising to them. But in my academy, we're heavily focused on mindset. There's an entire section called the mental six pack. It's always sprinkled into my lectures. And I'm just like you guys. I'm really big on the mindset part.
Yeah. And what's interesting about what you're saying too, is we're in this epidemic of chronic disease and autoimmune conditions that are largely caused by diet and lifestyle. And you obviously have been seeing this huge surgence of people over the last, 5 years or so that are curing these supposedly incurable autoimmune conditions from, diet, lifestyle, keto, carnivore, low carb, whatever you want to call it. But to your point, you need to first have that mental belief and that shift that you can actually heal. I know that's something that happened to me when I had ulcerative colitis, is I actually believed that I could cure my colon and get the inflammation out by these natural practices. Was that also a shift that you'd had for yourself when you were 250, this belief that you could lose that weight and get those abs that you had always wanted since you were a kid?
Yeah, you said it, because so many people, they always say, I need to see it to believe it. And that's actually the complete opposite. To your point, Brett, you got to believe it before you see it, right? So it's the complete opposite of what most people think. And yeah, and I think a big part of it for me and for a lot of people is finding out what your why is. And you probably heard it before. I mean, Jim Rohn has said it: when your why is strong, your how becomes easier. Tony Robbins says it all the time. But let's unpack that real quick, like the layers of your why. A lot of people, and I do this sometimes when I speak on stages, I'll ask somebody who wants to share their why, and somebody will raise their hand and they'll say, oh, my why is to lose 50 pounds that I've been carrying for 30 years because, it's holding me back. Great. But where is that showing up in your life, right? And I ask more questions. Where is that showing up in your relationships? Well, and she'll say, well, my husband and I, our relationship is kind of rocky right now because I'm tired all the time. I'm hurting all the time. We go on vacation and all I want to do is nap, and it's affecting my relationships. And then my grandkids come over and I don't have energy for them, and it's affecting my relationship with my daughter. So they start to show and share where it's showing up in their life. And when they're clear on that, that is their why. And when you keep that in front of you, when things get challenging, when you have a decision between staying on course or eating that donut or eating that pizza, think about the why, and then it helps to keep you on course. Or you fall off track somehow, there's a setback, but instead of that setback going from one meal to 1 month of setbacks, it's one meal, you think about your why, and then the next morning you're back on track. So I always say it's not about the setback, it's about the get back. But the why, and finding that why and keeping it in front of you, is very, very important.
For me at least, it seems like there's a lot of people out there who struggle to find that why, which is challenging. But I think diagnosing that, like, there is a lot of deep work that needs to go into it. Is there anything that you try to steer people towards doing to figure out, like, what is your why? What do you actually like to do? What is driving your motivations to do all these different things?
It's a really, really important question. It's a loaded question, right? Because there's no simple answer to it. I have found my why personally from voids, meaning my dad got sick from type 2 diabetes, and he ended up losing his life from the complications of diabetes. And that was a huge pain in 2013, 2014 for me and my family, a huge void, a huge loss. And out of that came my real purpose, which was, okay, 1 billion people need to be educated on metabolic health, right? So for me, that was a way that actually helped me reveal my why. So a lot of the times it's through pain, it's through a void. We don't want to have to go through that, but that's one way. Another way would be finding out what you love to do. And that's so unique to people, right? And this is so hard because that could be, a mom could be, I want to be the best mom for my family. And that's her why, which is a beautiful why, versus somebody who wants to be like a business person and grow their business and focus on their business. But both have a clear understanding of what's important to them. And as long as they're progressing towards that goal, that why, they're successful in whatever their unique why is. So it's a hard question to answer, but I will give a resource for your audience. And we were talking about this gentleman offline before we hit record. I would recommend a book called Highest Values, or excuse me, it's called Values Factor by Dr. John DeMartini. Read that entire book. There's a whole bunch of exercises that helps you uncover what your highest values are. The Greeks call it your telos. And once you determine that, then you could start to align your day-to-day activities to that unique highest values for yourself.
Beautiful. Well, we're definitely going to link to that in the show notes. And I've heard of the book. I haven't gotten to read it, but my promise to you is that we'll both dig into that book, and hopefully we can have like a part 2 to dissect some of that, because it sounds like it had a huge impact on your life.
That would be awesome. Yeah, huge impact. It's a really, really good book.
Awesome. So we talk a little bit about how important the mental machinery is. We touch on the nutritional machinery. Do you remember when you first heard about the term ketogenic diet or low carb diet? And just would love to learn more about what was it about that diet for you that just made it so successful and sustainable compared to maybe some other things that you had done in the past?
Yeah. So I lost my weight 2008, went down to 170, but I still didn't feel like I was optimally healthy. I still had acne. I still had some digestive issues. I still had some brain fog. So although I was fit, I was still kind of one of those fit, sick people trying to explore what real health looked like. So I was still searching. I did the calorie counting thing. I did the low fat thing. And then eventually, actually, I don't think you know this about my story. Maybe you do. I actually went full into the vegan diet, a plant-based diet for a year and a half, strict vegan, after reading the China study in 2012 or 2011, not knowing how to read studies and being fooled by this propaganda book that's cherry picking and manipulating studies. But back then I didn't understand that. So I read the China study, I read other books, and I'm like, this is the diet. I'm gonna be a vegan. And I was a vegan CrossFitter. And if there's one thing about a vegan and one thing about a CrossFitter, they can't shut up about being a CrossFitter or being a vegan. Imagine a vegan CrossFitter. I was telling all my friends about CrossFit and veganism.
That's the perfect storm.
The perfect storm. Or it's terrible for my friends. They probably hated me, right? And in the beginning, it actually was beneficial. I felt better eating a lot more plants and whole foods, of course, maybe for a few weeks. And then eventually it slowed down. But I was very dogmatic, and I put myself in a box. I was preaching the vegan diet, saying this is the diet to save animals, save the world, save your health. And I was very dogmatic about it. So I stuck with it, knowing intuitively and with my health, it wasn't working. And I stuck with it for a year and a half until I said, I don't feel good. It's taking me a long time to recover from workouts. I'm actually gaining some more weight. Hormones felt wonky. I did lab work and it verified all the things I was feeling. And then I started to go on, Google, Dr. Google, and explore other options out there. And I came across Paul Chek. I came across Dr. Daniel Pompa, who's my mentor right now. I came across Dave Asprey, Mark Sisson, and Mercola. I remember Mercola being on that list. And they were talking about ketosis, the ketogenic diet, and also intermittent fasting, and actually, how they're both hand in hand, and how this is a metabolic process, ketosis is, that has been around for a very long time. Our ancestors all went through it, and it was really fascinating to me. So I actually switched from being a vegan to going into a ketogenic diet with intermittent fasting, and it was a game changer for me. I felt so good. My workouts improved. This was back in 2013, where I was buying these ketone finger prick strips that were like $8 a strip. If you messed up, like, you lose $8. I remember being frustrated about that. And that's where it all started for me. And I've learned a lot of things since 2013 in regards to keto, but that's where I kind of fell in love with this process.
That's awesome. And for people listening who are interested in trying a keto diet, what sort of things can they expect in terms of benefits within the first maybe week to month to a few months into trying to mess around with the keto diet?
The most people are going to experience more mental clarity. So if you struggle with brain fog, if you struggle with remembering people's names, remembering where you left your keys, you're just constantly forgetting things, that improves tremendously because ketones have the ability, or I should say one of the three ketones, beta hydroxybutyrate, BHB, that ketone body has the ability to cross the blood-brain barrier and go right into your brain as an amazing energy source. The brain loves fat. I'll give you a perfect example. Babies that are born into this world and are breastfed are actually in ketosis. We are, our primal birthright is to burn fat because breast milk has saturated fat and cholesterol. And here's the argument that you might get when you say this. Yeah, but there's also sugar in breast milk. How could they be in ketosis? You're right, there is sugar, but that baby is so efficient at metabolizing that glucose, it actually goes in and out of ketosis, which helps the neurological development of that baby's brain. And I have the studies to verify that all on PubMed. You could do your own test. If you have a baby, go check your baby's ketones and you'll see that baby will be in ketosis. So burning fat is our birthright. The brain is fat. The body loves fat. So brain health and brain performance is one amazing benefit. Another one would be your cravings are dramatically decreased or almost completely gone. You're feeling satiated. You don't have to eat every 2 to 3 hours. You don't have to eat snacks all day long. You actually could go a period of time without food and feel really good because ketone bodies have the ability to help you feel satiated and full. It activates cholecystokinin and it just helps you feel full. So you'll notice that. And then, of course, there'll be weight loss. There'll be a lot of weight loss because you're dropping insulin. But I want to be clear, weight loss is a result of getting healthy. We're not losing weight in order to get healthy. We're getting healthy and then the weight comes off as a side effect. Big difference there. That's where the calorie counters get it wrong and people are just focusing on energy in versus energy out. Weight gain and being overweight is not your problem. Nobody in the history of this world has ever had a weight problem. When I was obese, I never had a weight problem. It is a weight symptom. We don't chase symptoms. That's what calorie counters do. We get to the cause, we lower inflammation, and then as a result, the symptoms go away. So those are the three main benefits. Mental clarity, you're feeling satiated and full, cravings go away, and you lose weight as a side effect of lowering inflammation and insulin.
What are the most common mistakes that you see people making when they're going towards a ketogenic diet for the first time, Ben?
The biggest mistake is eating the wrong fats. Eating inflammatory fats. And you know all about this. I mean, the seed oils, the polyunsaturated fats, they're called PUFAs, they're called linoleic acid, omega-6 fats. I interviewed two people. Dr. Kate Shanahan, who, as you both know, amazing deep nutrition author, medical doctor, Fat Burn Fix author. She was the nutritionist. For those who don't know, she was the nutritionist for the Los Angeles Lakers when Kobe Bryant used to play. She introduced the Lakers to bone broth and helped Dwight Howard with his sugar addiction. And she's a great friend of mine. I was just chatting with her earlier today. I interviewed her a couple times on my Keto Kamp podcast. And I interviewed a gentleman named Brian Peskin, who's an MIT researcher. He's got quite the brain and quite the research when it comes to omega-6 fats. And here's the question I asked both of them. First, I asked Brian, I said, hey, Brian, what do you think will be worse and cause more inflammation and more disease? Smoking cigarettes or eating these inflammatory omega-6 fats? And Brian said, well, according to his research, if somebody smoked 2 packs of cigarettes every day for 28 years, the chances of them developing lung cancer within those 28 years is about 16%, 1/6 in those 28 years. Then he said, if somebody ate these cooked vegetable oils every day for 28 years, the chances of them developing cancer and or heart disease is about 86%.
Wow.
That's just one man's research, right? So I shared this information with Dr. Kate Shanahan, and I said, what do you think about that 86% chance of disease? And she said, actually, Ben, that should be closer to 100%. That is a bold statement from a very smart woman and a very smart man. And why? Because they're very unstable. If you look at the chemical structure, they have many double bonds that are closely located to each other, aggressively attract oxygen. When you aggressively attract oxygen, it oxidizes. It's like biting into an apple and leaving it on the counter and it turning brown. That's happening to your cells. The processing of them are bad. Just go on YouTube and type in how canola oil is made. It's absolutely disgusting. They're called omega-6. So Dr. K. Shanahan has a list called the Hateful Eight. I'll share it with your audience. These are the ones you want to avoid. And guess what? They're all keto friendly, but they're not health friendly. And they actually will cause more inflammation than sugar. I would rather, if somebody, and I had this kind of discussion with Dr. Ben Bickman several times, I would prefer somebody to eat sugar versus these vegetable oils. And the reason I say that is because if you had sugar, go do some squats, go exercise, you burn off the excess glucose. But if you have these vegetable oils, the half-life for linoleic acid is 2 years. That means if you remove these fats today, in 2 years, half of it will remain in your body fat. So they are the hateful eight. You have canola, corn, cottonseed oil. You have sunflower, soybean, and safflower oil. You have rice bran and grapeseed oil. Those are the hateful eight. They're very unstable. We want to switch those for saturated fats, monounsaturated fats like beef tallow, which I know you two love, being carnivore advocates. So beef tallow, grass-fed butter, grass-fed ghee, duck fat, like real lard. If you could find high quality olive oil, high quality avocado oil that's not cut, those are okay as well. So that's like the biggest thing you want to do right there. Whether you're doing keto or not, make that swap.
So this might be, I think this is where people kind of run into some confusion, and you hit on this point perfectly. It's like these oils are keto friendly, but they're terrible for you. So it kind of hits on the point that I wanted to get to, which is labeling of all these diets kind of can lead people astray. And whether it's, keto, veganism, like there's certain aspects that you need to go further than just the label of the diet and like trying to follow, a picture icon saying this is vegan friendly, keto friendly. How do you think about, this perception around labeling of diets and the importance of actually just like cutting through all that noise and like understanding what you should and shouldn't be eating?
Yeah, you're right. And a lot of people, and look, I was even fooled by it for so many years. Like if somebody said, if something shows organic, it's probably healthy. If something showed vegan, it's probably healthy. And for keto, I mean, there's keto stamps in all these foods. So what I would recommend is this to your audience, to somebody who has the same question you just asked. How do we get through all that noise? How do we cut through all that noise? Don't look at keto as a diet. Look at keto as a metabolic process, right? Because technically it's not even a diet. And there's so many ways to enter ketosis. So think of it more of a metabolic process. And then number two, always look at the back of the label of these products. Don't fall for the brilliant marketing. There's such smart people who are the brains behind this marketing. Look at the ingredients. And if you see any of those fats that I mentioned, this is a good start and a good question. If you see any of those hateful eight on the back, you know that's something that you don't want to consume. If you see things you can't really pronounce and read, you have no idea what this means, probably a red flag that you shouldn't eat it. But if you think about getting food from the aisle with boxed foods in the grocery store versus the outer aisles or the outer ring of the grocery store where there's produce and meat. I mean, you look at meat, there's no nutrition label because it's just meat. You look at avocado, there's no nutrition. You guys talk about this all the time, but if you go down the aisle, you have like all these things listed. So go with the things that have minimal ingredients. There's actually no need for a list of ingredients because it's just one thing, and avoid those hateful eight and you'll be down the right direction.
What are the real foods that are the pillar of your diet that's worked well for you as Ben Azadi, just personally to you?
Lately, last few years, it's meat. Like I do really well with grass-fed meat and eggs. I love eggs. I do really well with avocados too, which is more of like a loose carnivore or level 4 carnivore, if you want to call it that. But meat, I love meat. We go to a restaurant, me and my fiance, and I get a plate full of like, sometimes I eat vegetables. So if they bring me a plate of meat and vegetables, I'm eating the meat first. And if I have room, then I'll have the vegetables, right? So for me, I feel really good with grass-fed, grass-finished meat. I feel really good with eggs. I feel really good with avocados. Sometimes I'll have white rice too on a like a high carb keto flex day, especially if I'm very active. So those are some foods that I feel really good with. Foods that I don't, by the way, and this is, for a lot of people doing keto, almonds. I don't do well with almonds. Almond flour, almonds, raw almonds. I just don't do well with almonds at all. And spinach and kale, I don't have that either or recommend that.
Yep.
And also nightshades like peppers and eggplants, I don't do well with either.
Interesting. How do you feel about the carnivore diet? I feel like it almost probably sounded like we rehearsed that question about what foods you like best, being on the Meat Mafia podcast, saying beef.
I love the carnivore diet. I just did a podcast with Dr. Mindy Pals, who you should interview. She's amazing. She's a friend of mine. And she asked me the question. Actually, we did like a AMA where our audience asked us questions, but she was asking me the keto questions. I was asking her the fasting questions. And the question was, should you do carnivore or should you do keto? Which one is better? And my answer was both. They're actually, when you do carnivore, you're in ketosis. It's a metabolic process. So it's kind of the same thing. But if you're brand new to the space, should you start with carnivore or start with keto? I would say keto first. The reason I would say that, and then I'll explain why I love carnivore. The reason I would say start with keto first is because keto is very low carb. Carnivore is zero carb. And if you're going from a high carb diet to zero carbs, that could be a tough transition. So I like keto as kind of like bridging the gap. I think carnivore is amazing. Most people in the world, not just the United States, have leaky gut, have SIBO, have candida overgrowth, have a dysbiosis in their gut, and they really need to avoid these anti-nutrients, these plant toxins, these things that are making your life worse, causing joint pain, post-nasal drip, inflammation. So carnivore is like the ultimate elimination diet. As you remove these anti-nutrients and eat meat, which have no anti-nutrients, then you can start to work on your gut, do some things. And then there comes a point in time where you can start to introduce one thing at a time that's not carnivore, 2 things, 3 things, and kind of see how your body responds to it. But I'll share with you guys, I don't know if we've ever spoken about this, but when I first decided to try carnivore, I think it was about 3 years ago, I decided, okay, I'm hearing so much about carnivore. I interviewed Paul Saladino back then before he was doing more of like a fruit carnivore. I wanted to teach it to my students, but I wanted to first do it before I would teach it to them. I always got to do it first. So I decided I'm going to do 40 days of carnivore, but I'm going to do a whole bunch of lab work. I'm going to do a $3,500 LabCorp panel on day 1, looking at inflammatory markers, thyroid, A1C, insulin, LDL particles, all that, homocysteine. And then I'm going to do 40 days of carnivore, see how I feel. And then I'm going to do the same test on day 40, see how I feel, but also look at the lab works day 1 versus day 40. And I did that. And my lab work completely transformed in 40 days. My C-reactive protein, which is very important for inflammation, went from 1.1 on day 1, which is good, but then it went to 0.5 on day 40, which is great. Homocysteine improved, A1C dropped a point, insulin got better. All of my inflammatory markers improved. My LDL went up, but my HDL went up too, but my inflammatory markers dropped, right? So that's important. And I felt amazing. I felt incredible. I had amazing digestion. I was not, no gas at all. So I felt really, my fiance loved that part. And for me, I have Raynaud's, which is an autoimmune condition. And I was getting flare-ups from time to time with Raynaud's before I did my carnivore experience. And in those 40 days, I only had 1 or maybe 2 Raynaud flare-ups in those 40 days, which was really, really good for me at that time. So it really improved my autoimmune symptoms. Now, since then, my Raynaud's has gotten much, much better. But at that time, that was really, really eye-opening to me. My autoimmune symptoms cleared up for those 40 days.
Wow. So you said it went down to 1 to 2 flare-ups over the course of 40 days. Before that, how many flare-ups would you typically have over 40 days if you had to estimate it?
It was happening about every day, every single day.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So from 40 to 2 was pretty
2.
unbelievable.
Yeah.
And the other cool thing about you getting your blood work done is like a lot of people with carnivore, they look better, they lose weight, they feel better. So you can probably assume that the biomarkers are improving with their blood work, but you took that next step to actually track it so you could see the tangible improvements that you were making.
Yeah. And I put it's on my YouTube channel. If anybody wants to see the video, I shared all my lab work. I think it's Keto Kamp. I ate nothing but meat for 40 days, something like that. But just Keto Kamp meat, you might pop up on YouTube.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Brad.
I was going to say, are you a big proponent for working with new clients just to get blood work done and test before and after? And are there any biomarkers in particular that you like people to be mindful of or pay attention to?
Lab work is great, but a lot of people don't know what to do with it, right? So I am a proponent of lab work. If you have somebody who understands it and how to put all the pieces of the puzzle together, and they have a lens of functional ranges versus the standard range, I see the value in it. I do believe most people should be getting the following lab work done every single year, at least. Start with the fasting insulin, because insulin resistance is an epidemic. Type 2 diabetes is growing fast, and insulin resistance leads to type 2 diabetes. But it could take 5 to 15 years before your doctor says you're diabetic. But in that time, even though your sugars were fine, your insulin was going higher and higher and higher. And then eventually you get insulin resistant, and then the sugars increase. Boom, you're diagnosed with diabetes. But if you would have gotten a fasting insulin done years ago, that would have never happened. You could have been proactive. You could have been what Einstein called a genius. He said intellectuals solve problems, geniuses prevent them. So you want to get your fasting insulin. You want that under 5. I like inflammatory markers that I'll group into one segment here, like high sensitivity C-reactive protein and homocysteine. Those are good markers to get for just inflammation in your body. So I would get those. Not huge on A1Cs as like my go-to, just because there could be a lot of things that could manipulate that. And sometimes the sugars won't even get out of control until insulin is really, the pancreas is really burned out. So I wouldn't probably put that in my top 5, but eventually you want to get an A1C. I also recommend a full thyroid panel, looking at T3, reverse T3, T4, free T4, and the antibodies to see if you have an autoimmune condition when it comes to the thyroid. Those are important as well. And then standard things like a complete blood count could be great. But to answer your question, yes, just make sure if you do get lab work, the person reviewing it understands how to review lab work, and they have a functional lens, not a standard reference range lens.
And maybe on that point, I think the standard reference range way of thinking would think of, cholesterol as kind of this, LDL bad type of thing. How do you talk to your clients and get them over that hump when you're saying, hey, you should be incorporating a little bit more fatty meats and things into your diet, when maybe they have a little bit of a resistance to it because the standard medical system has taught them that cholesterol is bad?
That question and that concern is probably the number one thing that we get. Like,
really,
I'm scared of doing keto or carnivore. I started doing keto and carnivore, my cholesterol went up. It's like the number one thing we get. I always tell them, hey, did you know, according to a Harvard study, that more people die from heart disease with normal to low cholesterol than those with high cholesterol? And they're like, what? And then I go into the benefits of cholesterol, how it builds your hormones, your sex hormones, how it helps your liver make bile, how it helps the brain, how it supports your membrane, your cell membrane, which is made up of cholesterol. So I go into the benefits and why it's important. And I tell them the total cholesterol is useless. Let's look at your HDL. Let's look at your LDL split up into particles. And then let's look at your triglycerides. And then let's look at your inflammatory markers, and let's find the full picture. Let's look at the full picture and then make a decision here. And if you really want to go advanced, you just go get a coronary artery calcium scan done, and you could see if you have any calcium built up there. But cholesterol, I would explain to them, is actually there to protect from the inflammation. The old analogy that people repeat all the time is like, every time there's a fire in your neighborhood, you drive by and you see firefighters with their fire hose at the scene of the crime. And you're thinking, they're the cause of that fire. I always see firefighters when I see a fire in my neighborhood, but they're there to repair the damage. They didn't cause the fire. Cholesterol is there to repair the damage. So what is causing the damage is the question. And then we kind of go down that alley.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear you talk about cholesterol, particularly in the context of achieving your goal of making 1 billion people metabolically healthy, is that we're combating against these decades upon decades of just pieces of misinformation that have been propagated around cholesterol being the biggest thing that you hear about. We hear about it all the time, concerns around that. Are there any other big pieces of misinformation in regards to, diet, nutrition, health that you're trying to debunk and make the information more public?
Yes. And you're right. We've got some Goliaths that we are, and my mission is your mission. It's not just mine. It's our mission, really.
Yes.
We've got some Goliaths, right? So definitely big pharma and the conventional medical system. That is our Goliath. So there's two people that came to, or two, I wouldn't say people because I don't like to go after people. There's two thought processes, or whatever you want to call it, two methods that came to mind when you first said that. Number one, it's the whole idea of symptoms versus root cause. And I'm going to give you an example here. Let's say somebody last night had 2 whole pizzas. They had 100 prunes. They had 2 cups of sauerkraut, a pound of cheese, all this food. And they wake up this morning and they have all of these symptoms. They are constipated. They're bloated. They've got all the stomach pain. So they're like, I need to call my allopathic conventional doctor and let them know that I'm dealing with all these symptoms. So they make an appointment. They go to their doctor's appointment and they're like, Doc, I'm dealing with bloating. I'm dealing with constipation. I'm dealing with all this stomach pain. And the doctor is hearing this person describe all of the symptoms. And the doctor, being in that medical box that they're in, says, no worries. Here's a prescription for an antacid. Here's a prescription for anti-flatulence. And here's a prescription for 5 more medications to help with their symptoms. Now, are those symptoms the actual problem, or are those symptoms an actual beautiful thing by the innate intelligence showing you did something wrong? What's causing the interference? That doctor, if the doctor would have just said, what did you eat last night? And she would have explained all that food, the doctor could have said, well, that was the cause. Just don't do that again, instead of writing 5 prescriptions. So that is one area that we have a big battle against. It's chasing symptoms versus getting to the root cause, because I look at symptoms as a gift, like a check engine light turning on when you're on a road trip. Thank God for that. Pull the car over, look under the hood. Let's figure out what's going on. That's what a symptom is. The second industry is the fitness industry in regards to eat less, move more. Okay. That is a big area that I'm tackling. And I don't know where you two stand on that, but eat less, move more is another way to chase symptoms. And look, I used to teach calorie counting. I hosted seminars in Miami for years. I call it the science of fat loss. But here's the deal. Calories matter, yes, but they're not important. They're not giving you the solution. They're causing a lot of people to be frustrated, and they're focusing on the wrong thing. They're distractions. Saying to lose weight, in order to lose weight and get healthy, you just have to cut your calories and exercise more. That's like, hey, Bill Gates or Warren Buffett, even better than Bill Gates. Warren Buffett, how do I get rich? You're at a seminar, Warren Buffett is teaching his class on how to get rich, and you raise your hand, you're like, Warren, how do I get rich? And he says it's simple. Just spend less than you earn. Okay, that makes sense, but is it giving you the solution? Same thing with calories in versus calories out. It's not giving you the solution. Focus instead on calories, focus on inflammation, hormones, cellular health. So that's the other industry that I'm going hard at right now. It's the calories in versus calories out.
And how do you tackle those last 3 points that you just made? How do you actually invest time and energy into improving hormone health, the actual mitochondrial health, and like focusing on those little details that are kind of a little bit harder to get to, but once you start figuring out, like, that's where the magic happens. Like, that's where the real fruit of like getting healthy is.
Yeah. In the name of the game is, okay, how can we lower inflammation at the cellular level? The number one thing for most people is going to be insulin. And I'm not opposed to insulin. I think insulin is a very important hormone. Thank God for insulin. But 88% plus of American adults are producing too much insulin. They're metabolically unhealthy. And that's according to University of North Carolina Chapel Hill study that I could give to you, 10-year study, 8,000 people. They were determining in 2018 at the end of the study, how healthy are American adults or how unhealthy are them. And they determined that only 12% of American adults are metabolically healthy, meaning 88% of them are not. And that was before COVID. It probably got worse. So the first step is, okay, let's find ways to lower insulin. Let's eat more fat and protein. That would be the first step. And then you could explore other things, of course. But the first step would be find ways to lower insulin. So the question that people will go on Dr. Google is, how do I lose weight? How many calories do I need to eat to lose weight? What's the best diet for weight loss? Those are the wrong questions. The question for most Americans is, how do I lower insulin? You start down that path, then you're going to go down the right direction.
And how do we go about successfully lowering insulin, Ben?
Easiest way is keto, right? Because we know out of the 3 macronutrients, protein, carbs, and fat, carbs will spike glucose and insulin the most. And of course, not all carbs are created equal, processed higher versus whole, but carbs will spike glucose and insulin the most. Second is protein, but protein has more of what's called a phase 2 insulin response. And it's kind of like a squirt of insulin, not a big response, which would be a phase 1 carb. Fat, if you just have a shot of olive oil or a tablespoon of butter, if you just have 100% fat, there's no insulin response. So the first step is eat more protein and fat, lower your carbs, eliminate the snacking, and then of course, move your body, build lean muscle, all these things we can add into the mix to become more insulin sensitive. But the first step is to get your body into ketosis. I really believe those 88% plus people, they're in a keto deficiency. They could really use ketosis, and that could be a good starting point for them.
And on the topic of ketosis, keto diets for women is something that appears to be particularly contentious, where there's women that are all in on it. There's also leading experts that feel like women need carbs, particularly around, I think, their cycle or their period or something in that nature. Have you done any research or dove into that topic at all, Ben?
Yeah. It's very important for people to understand, women to understand that, yes, women should definitely do keto, intermittent fasting, and carnivore differently than men. And cycling women who have a menstrual cycle should do it different than postmenopausal women. So chapter 12 of my book, Keto Flex, is all about that. There's a week-by-week breakdown of how to do this the right way. The week before your period, to your point, Brett, is the week where you actually want to have some more carbs. That's the week to build the hormone progesterone. That's a progesterone building week to help with that monthly cycle. And you don't build progesterone by doing carnivore, keto, or fasting. It actually lowers progesterone. So for the cycling women, that week before your period is very important to bump up the carbs, make those hormonal conversions. But here's the cool thing. Once you have your period, that week of your period, called the bleed week, you could do as much fasting as you want, as much carnivore and keto. You could be more aggressive that week. So you definitely want to go according to your hormones. Now, postmenopausal women could do keto, carnivore, fasting more closely to men because they have more of a faster recycling pattern. But definitely I'm on the side of women doing it differently. And I work with a team of about 45 doctors, including Dr. Pompa, Dr. Mindy. And out of those 45 doctors, there's tens and tens of thousands of patients. And we've seen that when we give carbs to women who have their menstrual cycle before their period, it makes a big difference versus when we don't.
Ben, your perspective on all these topics is just so great. I feel like you come at it from this perfect lens of like the mental side, but also all of the data and facts to back it up on the nutritional side. So it's just great to have you on and really appreciate what you're doing in the space, and just that message of trying to change 1 billion people's lives through better health is core to our ethos as well. So, we're excited to be, alongside of you working on that mission. What sort of things can people expect from you over the next, 6 to 12 months in terms of putting out content or, whatever it is that you're working on here in the short term?
Thank you, Harry. I feel the same way about you guys. And I really enjoyed our conversation on my podcast. Love what you guys are doing to educate people on agriculture and sustainable farming. It's just so important, especially it's the most needed right now in this world where we have all these people pushing plant-based and veganism. And so thank you for what you two are doing to educate so many people. Appreciate the next 6 to 12 months would be, I love speaking. Going back to that conversation on highest values, like my highest value, one of them is speaking on stages and educating people in person. So I'm going to do a lot of speaking gigs. I'm going to be speaking in New York City later this month at Keto Symposium, at Louisville, Kentucky, right after that in October for Keto Palooza, Biohacking Congress in Miami, Live It to Lead It in November in Utah. And then the Low Carb Cruise just asked me to go to on their cruise in June of next year to speak on their cruise. And then, as many speaking gigs as I can possibly do. I love that. So you see me a lot. I would love to meet you all in person. I know I met Brett, but Harry, I would love to meet you in person and your audience in person. And just more with the social media, getting the content out there. We're about to hit 500 episodes on our podcast. So more content, more podcasts. But for me, the main thing would be getting on stage more often.
That's awesome. Well, clearly it's, I don't know if it's a gift or it's something that you've cultivated over time, but it's just been amazing to hear more about your story, especially when you're saying where you were at 23, 24 years old, 250 pounds, moving equipment and things like that to where you are now, literally changing people's lives. writing books, running podcasts, running YouTube channels. It's just unbelievable. It honestly inspires us. And I think it's going to inspire a lot of other people, Ben. So just thank you so much for doing this, and, honored to now be friends with you, and just looking forward to seeing where this whole thing goes.
I'm honored as well, Brett and Harry. It's a great relationship we have. We'll do more collaborations, and the goal is just to keep educating people and get the word out there. So I'm excited to see where you guys are going to be in the next 6 to 12 months. You guys have taken off in a short amount of time. So it's very exciting to see.
Yeah. Onward. Here we go.
There we go. Day one.
So, thanks, Ben.
Thank you, guys.